Morning, all the participants and the panelists. We are on the third day of our ongoing training sessions. So now we are having 103 participants. I think it's already 11, so we can start our program. So on the first sessions of today's training program, Ms. Dolphy Raman will talk about what is child-centric disaster risk reductions. So over to you, ma'am Dolphy.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, very clearly audible, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. And good morning to everyone. And I hope everyone is doing well. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Just let me know if it's visible. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Very clearly visible.
Okay. Fine. Okay, thank you. So today I'm going to be talking about, what is CCDRR. So because you know that this is basically training is named, child, online training for child-centric disaster risk reduction. So I'm going to talk to you about what is CCDRR, why do we need it, why do we need a special wing, special center and special part of DRR dedicated to children, number one, and what is it that CCDRR Center of NIDN, how do they contribute to this entire realm of children and disasters, right? So I'm sure like till now, you know, what are disasters, why do they keep happening, and why their intensity is going to keep on increasing. We are moving towards, there's an intellectual called Ulrich Beck. He calls it a risk society. The entire society risk is woven around, being weaved around the society, and it's becoming the society is nothing but risk society, right? So we are moving towards risk, and risk is only going to increase. We know that because of climate change, now even IPCC has said that there are certain changes, certain disasters which we cannot revert. We cannot reverse certain impacts of climate change and certain impacts that humans have done to the planet, to the environment. So this is something that we are going to have to live with. So there is two-pronged strategy. Number one is whatever damage that we have done and we cannot reverse, we have to learn to adapt to its impact, number one. Number two, we have to build our lifestyle in such a way that we do not impact the environment, planet, or our surroundings in a way that there are more disasters, right? So two-pronged strategy we have to adopt. Anyway, moving on to CCDRR, I want to show you guys a video here. Just a moment. Just let me know if it would be. I'm going to share the sound, and just a moment. Yes, so I'm going to be sharing. Sorry. Yes, so this is the video.
Have you ever wondered if children have rights? Every person on the planet has rights, and so does every child. Child rights mean that we have the right to everything that helps us be healthy and happy. Nutrition and good health, good schooling, freedom of expression, and protection from anything that may be harmful. Every child has the right to good health care and nutrition. It does not matter if one is a boy or a girl. Every child has the right to education. It does not matter who we are or where we come from. Each one of us should be able to complete school. Each one of us has the right to protection, which means that we need to be safe from all sorts of violence, whether at school or the street or even at home. Just because we are children does not mean that our opinions can be silenced. Only we know what it is to be children. It is everyone's responsibility to ensure that every child has the right to survival, development, protection, and participation. We deserve to be healthy, happy, and full of hope. And we can't do it alone. You made a promise to ensure every right for every child 30 years ago. What are you doing to keep the promise today?
So I hope everybody was able to understand it. Just sorry. Sorry. Yeah. So I hope everybody was able to understand it. Can you tell me in the chat box, because I know you've had your sessions about child rights. Can you tell me in the chat box what is the promise that they were talking about? They said that every child, people made a promise to children 30 years ago. What was that promise? Can we have the answer in the chat box? So you guys talked about child rights yesterday, if I'm not wrong. So what was that promise? So I want to know about that promise that was made, they were talking about in the video that was made 30 years ago. You can answer education. Okay, that specific promise. Remember, it was a video by UNICEF. So it has to do something with the UN. We signed something. There was some sort of convention that we signed. So, yeah. Okay, so background, meaning why I showed you that video is because children's rights, every person has a right. We come from a place of human rights when we talk about CCDRR, but to talk about children specifically, why? Because children are mostly dependent. It is because of by the virtue of their age and by virtue of them being dependent on others. They are dependent for their finances. They are financially dependent. They are dependent because they need protection. Somebody else, they can come and harm them. We know children get abused even at homes. They get molested, sexually, harassed. And just a few days ago, there was a rape of this 13-year-old girl who was again then, raped when they went to report that. So she was just 13 years old, right? Imagine the kind of trauma that child had to suffer at multiple stages, in a very short span of time. So children, they cannot protect themselves against such, harms. So they are dependent for that as well. And also by virtue of their age, they lack experience. They cannot, make certain decisions, right or wrong decisions. Suppose there is an earthquake right now, right here. I know what to do. I can quickly maybe, assess risk. I can, because I have that kind of experience because of age, because of other factors in my life. So I might be able to protect myself. But imagine if it's a child sitting here and there's an earthquake, they won't, most of the times they won't know what to do. And, after disaster strikes, there's a very short window of response time that people have to act. Otherwise, the damage can be immense. So that is the reason why we talk about children separately. That is the reason why we need specific and special efforts to protect children from disasters. And we know that mostly the way a disaster will affect a child and the way it would affect an adult are, really different. A child is more vulnerable than, an adult maybe. That doesn't mean they are weaker. It just means because they are at that point of their life where they are dependent on others and cannot be really independent, at that point of time. So this is the reason why we are talking about child rights specifically and why child-centric DRR is such an important, area of research, of intervention, of action. Right. So we saw that there is a right to participation. So mostly when we talk about children, we think about them as, others. and we do not involve them. So imagine if somebody, okay, imagine for everyone in your life, if somebody is making a decision for your life, right, and they do not involve you. So I'm going to give you a very, very rudimentary, example. For example, marriage. When, they talk about anyone's, in India, we do have a culture of arranged marriage. Your parents or anybody talks about your marriage, and they do not take your decision or your, opinion in the matter. It's very, very wrong. We feel violated. We feel wronged, right? So that is how, when we talk about somebody, if we don't take their opinions, their voices, in consideration, it's a violation of their rights. If you're talking about me, you're taking decisions about me, I need to be involved. Similarly, when we talk about children, so child-centric DRR, child-centric approach is incomplete without the participation of children. Always, always remember, they are the largest stakeholders. They should be able to own the entire process of child-centric DRR. That is why, we at CCDRR, we have engaged with multiple, youth volunteers, multiple children, in order to, bring about that kind of approach, right? And children, that, if you look at climate change movement, there is this right now in civil society, children and youth, they are spearheading the climate change movement. About Fridays for Future, about Greta Thunberg, about child rights activists in our country, talking about young people, children coming out and talking about climate change. So imagine their participation. Nobody involved them. They themselves rose up in this kind of social action. And now even UN has, acknowledged their commitment. So imagine, they are a powerhouse of action. There is a lot of energy. They just need right direction, right guidance, and acknowledgement, right? They bring a lot of creativity to room. And I say this from experience, because I have, worked with a lot of children. It is more fun to teach children about disaster management. They, if we, talk about mock drill or evacuation drills, earthquake drills, working with children, they pick up faster. They are able to learn faster than adults. So this is my personal experience that I am, telling you about. And yes, there are specific risks faced by children. What are those risks? Like I said, child abuse. They cannot protect themselves against this kind of abuse. And, and, everybody has gone through some kind of abuse or other. Maybe forms will change, degrees and intensities can vary. But, sometimes, as a child, you don't even know how to, you might know that there is something that is wrong that is happening to you, but you're not able to articulate it. You are not able to communicate it to your parents or somebody, that you're close to. So there is heightened chances of, children not being able to communicate risk. So that is why, now we have started teaching them about good touch, bad touch, and how to communicate their discomfort, right? And then we need to involve children in DRR efforts. Of course, we need to involve them. We cannot talk about school safety without children's involvement. How will you, protect somebody who doesn't even know, how to protect themselves, who doesn't even know, how to deal with risk then when it appears. And child-centric, it is for children and with children. So we have already spoken about it. Children need to participate, and we need to encourage them to participate. And sometimes we do complain about children not being interested. If a child is not interested in an activity like this, more often than not, the issue is that, that environment, they don't feel safe in that environment. Safe, not necessarily meaning that, there is some kind of harm that is being posed. Just, sometimes, there are certain environments that we also enter in. We don't feel like sharing. We don't feel like, participating. So there has to be this comfortable environment, comfortable and safe environment that has to be created by teachers, by parents, by adults around them, so that children can, fully participate and realize their potential, right? So, and again, child-centric, number one rule, number one principle you need to know, that whenever we talk about anything that is child-centric, we are not going to talk about children as victims. Right. When you talk to, if I talk to you as victims that, there's going to be risk and everybody is going to be a victim. So that kind of, approach, makes you very, very passive. Children are not victims. We have to empower them, encourage them, provide an environment to them so that they can become these actors, these change agents, and not only save themselves, but others around them. And this has been, there is documented research that if we teach children about risk, about disaster management at home, they go back and they are so excited. They usually talk to their parents, they talk to their siblings, they tell everybody about it, right? So they are really, if, given the right resources, right guidance, children are really, really an active source of, motivation and action. So their participation is of immense importance. So there is one more video that I want you to see about child-centric DRR. So I'm going to share that. So meanwhile, if there are any questions or any thoughts, you can, post them in the chat box. Just a moment. Let me share sound. Yes. Yes. So.
Earthquakes, droughts.
Is it audible? Is the sound on? Can somebody please tell me? Either in the chat box
Yes,
or...
yes, ma'am. It is audible
Okay.
and less visible. Yes, visible.
Okay.
Earthquakes, droughts, wildfires, epidemics, floods. We can't prevent natural hazards, but if we are unprepared, they can turn into disasters right before our eyes. A poor family, a hazard-prone area, lack of early warning systems. This is a recipe for disaster, coupled with unplanned settlement, economic crisis, violent conflict, or climate change's exacerbating effects. And this family's vulnerability can increase. A vulnerable and unprepared population leads to greater disaster impact, and hard-earned progress and development is washed away. In the past 15 years, 3 billion people were affected by natural hazards worldwide. Children make up as much as 60% of those impacted. When children's homes are damaged, their education interrupted, their families torn apart, the risk of psychological trauma, injury, malnutrition, and disease skyrocket. They can fall victim to abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. While natural hazards may be unavoidable, we can prevent disasters by focusing on at-risk communities with the goal of strengthening their resilience. 2015 witnessed the pivotal Sendai Agreement that set guidelines for governments and communities to reduce and prevent disaster risk. It has since informed the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the World Humanitarian Summit. Disaster risk reduction, or DRR, is now a priority, especially in the context of climate change. UNICEF has committed itself to supporting and implementing these efforts, especially for the most vulnerable children, by acknowledging their particular vulnerabilities and making sure their voices are heard, and taking a more nuanced approach to assessing risk by breaking down data into categories of age, sex, and disability. By continuing to invest in preparedness, working toward ending child hunger and malnutrition, and providing life-saving health treatments, by supporting safe schools and teaching DRR and CCA, climate change adaptation, and preparing and protecting children and their families during a disaster and in its aftermath. UNICEF's aim is to strengthen social services that reduce disaster risk and are accessible to all. This is what we call resilient development, so that the next time there is a hazard, there is a plan in place. Here, 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 and all around the world. Because a natural hazard doesn't have to become a disaster.
Right. So I hope everybody was able to, connect to the video. Yeah. So you saw that how children become more vulnerable. If you look at COVID, for 2 years, children's education was disrupted, and they were sort of isolated from outside world, and a lot of kids went through behavioral changes. A lot of kids, were not able to understand what was happening, and then on top of that, if somebody was infected at their house, if their parents were affected, and a lot of children, they were orphaned. So this is going to keep happening. So if there is a flood situation in your area, you are not going to be able to get to your school. If there is any due to climate change, I don't know if you know that due to climate change, in certain African countries, there are journalists and researchers, they have found case studies that say that because of climate change, there is poor agriculture, poor access to water, and because of which families are becoming poor, and they are not able to afford keeping keeping a child in their house. So what do? They have the option of marrying their girl child to somebody, so that the burden is reduced. So those child brides, they are a product of climate change, right? And even in COVID times, we saw that girls that dropped out, due to issues with family livelihood, income was impacted. Girls, those who dropped out, they had lesser chances of going back to school, and in that condition, they were married off. Instances of child marriage rose. Instances of child labor rose, because when the family income decreased, children could not go to school, and they went into child labor. So children, they become really, really vulnerable due to disasters and climate change. And this is going to keep happening, because disasters, they directly impact your economy, they impact stability, and children require that kind of stability to flourish and develop, right? And what are the goals of CCDRR? The goals are to strengthen accountability mechanisms. What do we mean by accountability mechanisms? That governments are responsible. The promise that they were talking about in the previous video is the United Nations Convention on Rights of Children, right? UNCRC, which was signed by almost all UN members, and it is part of, child rights are a part of international commitment that we have. And so to hold these governments, to hold office bearers, to hold people in power accountable for achieving child rights, right? That is goal of CCDRR. And to duty bearers, who are duty bearers? Duty bearers are teachers, duty bearers are even parents, school management, duty bearers are your government, duty bearers are social workers, duty bearers are your mental health, professionals, especially child psychologists and child counselors. They are duty bearers who, are required to, support children, create an enabling environment for children to realize their rights. If you look at it, there's family, there's child. If you look at the diagram, there is child at center of it. Then the immediate attachment is family, then community, then civil society, private sector. So everybody in the environment has some sort of duty towards children, right? Can we have everyone to switch off their mics, please? Thank you. And to safeguard children's rights in relation to disasters and climate change, because disaster and climate change, all of these issues, they will come and impact your rights firsthand, right? And children are even more vulnerable. Like I said, enabling environment for children. So rights have no meaning if there is no enabling environment. For example, right to education, right? So if a child does not have, a support system at place, if the child, there is poverty at home, there is abuse at home, there is, certain issues that the child has. The child is not going to reach school, no matter how much ever free education is provided. If the school is, suppose 4 kilometers or 5 kilometers away from the child's house, and the child has no way of getting to the school, reaching the school, especially girl children, there is the rights that you have given them hold no meaning. They will not be realized. So along with the rights need that enabling environment, right? So that enabling environment has to be created by the governments, all the duty bearers around children, the entire society, right? And they have to be, we have to enable them to raise their voice, because sometimes no matter how much you monitor your child, no matter how much teachers monitor their students, we sometimes we will fail to sort of catch these little issues that they have. So in that in that situation, children have to be able to tell you, to articulate, to communicate their issues, problems to those that are nearer to them, those that they feel safe communicating with. So that also has to be done, and there are ways and techniques to do that, right? And again, their role and participation in the community. Yes, so we have already talked about that they have to be engaged in decision making. They have to they are in your household, in schools. Even I'll give you a small example, that in our house we used to not separate garbage, dry and wet. We have three segregations at our home. One is dry waste, the other is wet waste, and in dry we have one is recyclable waste and the other one is non-recyclable. I did not do that. My cousins, they are 10 or 15, they're two. One is 10 years old and the other one is 15 years old. They are the one who taught us this, because they started doing that. They learned it in their school and they started doing that at their home, and then they once they came to our house and they taught us also to do that. So that is how they learned it from schools. And I know that they changed garbage disposal methods at 2 houses. So if that is how children can impact change. So I'm sure you all have, seen that, seen children do that in your own, personal as well as professional spheres, right? Again, CCDRR activities, we have international commitments. We have under the UNCRC, we have certain commitments. We have commitments under national legislative processes. There are laws that have been made for protection of children. So we have CCDRR. What does it do? It helps us realize all of those commitments, that a vision that we have for safe environment for children. CCDRR helps us in that, right? Again, CCDRR is also important because whenever there is a disaster, no matter how rich you are, no matter how rich of a nation you are, how many resources that you have, in a time of disaster, your resources are going to be always limited. Why? Because during disaster, suppose your need is here in normal time and your resources are here. And right now your needs and resources are meeting, but during disaster your needs will increase, but your resources will not increase in that. In one earthquake, in one flooding season, your needs will increase here, but resources will not increase. Even if your resources are more than your needs in normal time, the needs will shoot up so much that the resources cannot match. So this is what always happens in disasters. And what does CC, and then those limited resources that we have, how do they get distributed in the society? They get distributed in the society depending on the power relations in the society. Those more powerful will get more resources. It's simple demand and supply, right? When supply is lower than demand, where does the supply go? It goes to those with more power in the society. And children, as we know, that they have a disadvantage when it comes to power dynamics, power relations in the society. So that is where CCDRR comes. It tries to allocate those limited resources to child, to those working for children, to child rights. So that is where CCDRR is very important, because otherwise children will be forgotten, because they do not hold that kind of what we say power position in those power dynamics as they exist in multiple societies, right? And and CCDRR, what does it do? It places children at the center of any risk that is emerging. So we have a lot of trainings when where we talk about climate change. So what do? We keep children as at the center of those talks, because number one, they have to live the longest with climate change, right? Their future is at risk, not only current but future risk. So CCDRR sort of has that visionary approach towards risk for children, which is required at this point of time. And you know that we view children as a valuable, participant, a valuable resource towards making, disaster, the risk of disaster reduce. And we know that children, this is the girl, I keep forgetting her name. She cleaned this pond in the, this was near her school. She helped clean this entire pond near her school. So this is what children can do. So in your life also, if you want to share, you can share in the chat box that if you have seen in your life, if a child has made this kind of change happen in your life. And look at that teenager, Greta Thunberg, and all the, if you must have seen November last year, a lot of kids, they, held protests and demonstrations during the climate change talks, asking world leaders to take action, because, their future was at risk. And they are rightfully in doing that, because their entire future is in jeopardy. Children are, going to be struggling with bad economy due to disaster. They are not going to get employed. Their, very survival is at risk. Child marriages are increasing. Child labor is increasing. And we are moving towards a really, really risky situation. Then CCDRR, it engages young people to make informed decisions. For example, in what is an informed decision? So anytime you want to make a decision, you can't and shouldn't be making a decision without having all the information that is, that exists around any issue. So that is what CCDRR also does. We don't believe in making decision for the children. Remember, child is the participant, child is the main actor in the entire process. So what will we do? Because due to lack of experience, they might not have all the information. We will capacitate them, we will support them, we will give them all information, we will make them aware of the situation, and then empower them to make their own choices and decisions, having all the information and awareness. So that is how we support them, that is how we enable them to make their own decisions, in the face of risk, right? And again, building a culture of safety. If you look at countries like Japan, right, Iran, then Turkey. So in those countries, even in Caribbean countries, where there is a hurricane season every year. Even we have a cyclone season every year. So what do? Is they have such, children from the get-go only, they are taught that for them risk. For example, Japan, they get dozens of earthquakes every year. California in the United States, it's highly earthquake prone area. One of the largest faults on the earth are present near and around California. Right, so they get these dozens of earthquakes. So what do? So they have built this culture of safety, and children, they don't know any other way to survive, as and when they, the way we teach them speech to speak. In similar manner, they are taught these safety practices. For example, they are taught mock drills. They are taught how to, line up and exit a place where if there is an earthquake, if an earthquake happens, how to save themselves. So all of this is taught to them from the get-go, and also to use the information. That their local radios, they keep disseminating information on a regular basis. So children are also taught to, listen to radio every day, listen to communication, and also to communicate their own risk in a manner. So this is also what we are trying to build under Disaster Management Act, under, the 10-point agenda of, Prime Minister for disaster risk reduction. A culture of safety is actually the main goal. We want to inculcate safety in such a manner that it is the culture, it is becomes the culture. Once it becomes culture, we can avoid risk. So it's not only that, whenever there is a risk, then we will act. No, we have to change our lifestyles and teach kids in such a manner that, because now we know that risk is going to be a part of our life, and we need that culture of safety to survive, right? So this is what, CCDRR looks at it. It's only when children learn such, safety practices can we, create a culture of safety. Then tomorrow's leaders, of course, they are the decision makers and leaders of tomorrow, and they need to learn about risk right now, so that tomorrow they can make risk informed choices and decisions that take risk into account. So I mean, if I talk about my generation, we did not grow up in such a risk-informed environment and time. So sometimes it does take us time to, factor risk in. Yes, I do factor risks in because that's my occupation. But other people who are not from probably this occupation, my peers, they might not be able to, factor that risk in. But children, they need to do that, because that is where we are headed. And right now also current risks are very, very high. So they need to learn that, right? So that is what CCDRR does, right? We know that it's a rights-based approach. And yes, CCDRR, we look at children of all, colors, children of all classes, children of all castes, children of all genders, children of all, gender identities. There is no discrimination. You know that children, they are from different kind of socioeconomic backgrounds, and there cannot be any discrimination. How can, if it's a right-based approach, how can we discriminate? There is no discrimination. We understand that different children are, they come from different races, they come from different, and in India, caste is an important factor. They come from different castes, they come from different classes. Not all children might have privileges. Some have faced, extreme poverty, some have faced extreme exploitation. We do understand that, and we acknowledge those, issues, those socio-economic circumstances that they come from, but then there is no discrimination of any sort in CCDRR. Otherwise, the entire point, the entire exercise becomes moot, right? And we know that, your government is your parent, right? And it is the absolute responsibility of government to take care of its children, right? They are also one of the guardians. We know that during COVID, when children were orphaned, the government had to take it upon themselves to then maybe decide for children whether they should go to next of kin, or what the future, who will be their guardian till the time they turn 18. So the governance structures also have to be very, very strong for children to, be able to participate in that manner. So CCDRR helps the government. CCDRR works closely with, women and child, Ministry of Women and Children, and then departments of women and children in districts and states, right? And you know that CCDRR is a collaboration of UNICEF and NIDN, and UNICEF world over looks after child rights, that arm of UN that looks after children. So we are engaged, we are partnered with all of these organizations that are looking after children, right? And during Cyclone Fani, this is a case study that this is what CCDRR participated in Cyclone Fani. And this is just an example of what CCDRR did. So malnutrition, if you look at the first point, that CCDRR worked with children who were underweight. SAM children is severely and acute malnourished children. They are, this is an acute form of malnutrition. And CCDRR not only works with children, but it also works with women, because child health, child rights are closely associated with, women rights. We have worked with pregnant women. We have worked in maternal health. We have now worked with newborn babies' health, and then there are childcare institutions, then food. So all spheres wherever child rights are impacted, and even we are now looking at gender as well, that, because children are also, they come in all, children might identify with any gender, so that there should not be any discrimination. Then there are adolescent girls, there are girl children, they have specific issues that are presented by, in the region that we live in, and gender is also an important part of CCDRR's agenda. Then school fees were waived due to CCDRR's, intervention. And even during COVID, we held multiple discussions around child rights, around how to, if somebody was quarantining at home, how to safeguard children, how could mothers who were COVID infected, how could they still remain in contact with newborn babies and protect them? So all of this was conducted by CCDRR, right? So because of dearth of time, I'm not going to go deep into this. You have the, you're going to get the slides, so you can just read and get more information about it. So how do we implement it? There is no hard and fast rule, right? So one very important rule again of disaster management is adaptation. You might not, over here right now, I might think that a certain thing has to be achieved in a certain way, but in a disaster you are not going to get resources. You're not, you don't know, there is a lot of uncertainty, so you have to be quick on your feet. You have to be very, very malleable. You have to be very flexible, and whatever you have got at that point of time, that is what you have to use to achieve your objectives. So there is no one particular way, and different different groups of children will need different approaches. So yes, and different agencies will approach it, differently on the basis of what their mandates are. For example, the Department of Public Distribution, Food and Public Distribution, they will, look at food security. They will look at malnutrition. Department of Health will look at, child rights in their through their own mandate. The social justice and social welfare departments, they will look at differently. And then Department of Women and Child Development, they have their own agenda. So every department will come together and help this. So every department, every agency, every part of social civil society, for example, some organizations like Pratham, they look at child education. Then somebody will look at child health. So a lot, multi-level, multi-organization. That is why CCDRR has partnerships with organizations and government, line departments all across the board, so that we have a multi-pronged holistic approach towards children, right? Yes. So, and this is from experience that yes, working with children has added value. We taught, I remember I was positioned in Faridabad in Haryana. It's in Delhi NCR, it's near Delhi. And I worked in Delhi as well in schools, and we made, I taught mock drills to a lot of kids, and from every place, there was positive feedback. Children were very, very excited. They learned so quickly. They learned sometimes, I was also involved in training officers and teachers, but my experience with children was, the most fruitful, because, there is this energy that they bring, and they learned very, very quickly, even, quicker than, qualified officers. Sometimes they would learn very quickly, and we taught first aid to them, and we used art and a lot of these ways to communicate risk to them, and they responded really well. So this is my personal experience, and also literature also has said the same, right? And there is a lot of potential in kids, a lot of potential in kids. And yes, so this we have already discussed, that CCDRR works with duty bearers. Duty bearers means whose duty it is to help enable children realize their rights, right? So how to involve, we have already spoken about it, like we did it through extracurriculum activities. We, first of all, we have to explain to them what is happening. If you are talking about climate change, tell them how climate change is happening. Tell them how, there is risk around climate. And, more often than not, most of the kids would already know it, because this is what is happening on social media. Everybody is getting informed. Children are talking about climate change a lot, and they would know. You'll be surprised that they might know more than, what we know. Right. So, and a lot of children, there are youth clubs, there are eco clubs in schools also these days, and there are poster competitions by government, by different organizations in schools, through which they get informed. So these are very, very healthy ways of involving children in DRR. If nothing else, you can at least talk about risk and also how to approach it, right? And so we have already done this, right? We've spoken about all of this. So this is the structure of basically how, that a lot of kids and youth, they volunteer. I also, when I was a teenager, I volunteered in NSS. NSS, my sister volunteered in NCC. I also volunteered in a, youth organization at my college, right? So we would participate in fundraising, we would participate in culture programs and all of that. So this is participation. So youth and children have to participate. There are government, NSS and NCC is run in mostly all colleges and even in high schools sometimes. So you can, participate through these organizations. Where can they be engaged? So I remember this was when I was in college. A few of my classmates, they had participated in the management of Kumbh Mela. We used to have these internships, and you could do internship anywhere that you wanted, provided it is related to disaster management. So they would come back and tell us that in the management of Kumbh Mela, a lot of local youth, young people and teenagers had also volunteered. So crowd management, blood donation. As an NSS volunteer, I have been involved in organizing blood donation camps, then community kitchens can be run by them. They can, help in evacuation of injured people, and then waste management, in collecting waste. You must have seen that in beaches and all, wherever there are, cleaning drive, youth and children really, really participate. So they can participate in this manner, right? And CCDRR Center, that we are located at Vijayawada in Andhra Pradesh, and this is a center run in collaboration with NIDN and UNICEF. So, right. And what is it that we do? We do trainings, like we have this training with you. We have multiple trainings. We have trainings regarding youth and their participation. We have spoken about participation a little in this presentation as well. Then research about, getting new data about children and the risk that they are presenting, about new interventions that are happening during COVID. A lot of research was done into what is happening to children on ground. How is it they are surviving or not surviving? So a lot of research and a lot of data that is brought about by as how children are faring in the face of risk and how to, solve those problems. Then consultation, definitely consultation with multiple organizations, like we are consulting with multiple universities, multiple schools, colleges, organizations, governments, nationally, regionally, and internationally, right? And then advocacy for child, right? Speaking for children, not on behalf of children, but for children, and enabling them to, raise their own voice. This is what CCDRR is doing. There is child-centric assessment. For example, during COVID, we did have certain assessments as to what the impact was when it came to child labor, when it came to child's health. We spoke a lot about vaccination in children, about how we needed good amount of data before children were vaccinated about, especially when there were these rumors that, certain variants are going to come that are going to impact children. We held certain consultations with experts, and we found out that, it was just a rumor. There was no biological evidence to that. Then social protection of children, how to protect them from abuse, how to, create a food security with them, right? Then safeguarding child infrastructure. Child infrastructure is, for example, Anganwadi is the entire system of ICDS. So this is the infrastructure that is created to, help children, for example, midday meal schemes, all of this. Protecting children in emergencies. This is very, very important. During emergencies, a lot of children are left behind. There's a death that is going to happen in, during disaster. There is, injury that is going to happen in camps. Kids are, forced to live in really, really unhygienic conditions. Children are abused after a disaster. The incidence of abuse increases. We know that during COVID, instances of domestic abuse increase. The distress calls to child helpline, childline also increased, right? So this happens. This is what will happen after a disaster. There is proper evidence of, that it has happened in almost all disasters. We help in participatory action. Participatory action is children will participate and take action. Life skill education, we, teach them important life skill education. For example, how to navigate risk, how to participate in climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation, how to participate in mock drills, DRR activities. So there are multiple trainings for that. So right now, the training that you are doing is just an introductory training to CCDRR. School safety, this is very, very important. Government of India also considers this in, at the top of their agenda. Schools, we have a school safety policy also in place in India, and partnerships, of course, like I said, partnerships with all sort of stakeholders. So thank you very much. So this was a small introduction. This is just an introduction to CCDRR. If we start talking about CCDRR, there is no, even the entire day would, feel less less of a time. So in the time constraint that we had, I've tried to explain the maximum to you. If there are any questions and answers, or even remarks that you wanted to post in the chat box, you may kindly do that. You can ask any question that, pops in your mind. So there is one question by Divan Kumam. How they say that, how can we provide mock drills in our school? Who will be providing the drill? Yes. So mock drills is basically, what do? You must have learned this on the first day when you talked about disaster management mechanisms, and also in home school safety, that in a district, when it comes to school safety, your nodal officer is DEO, District Education Officer. So if you are a school, you could be a private school, you could be a government school. It is DEO, District Education Officer, is the nodal officer. You can approach them and they will help you. So every school is supposed to have a school disaster management plan, an evacuation plan. It is mandatory, especially government schools. I know that it is mandatory to have these plans. Even private schools, by the school management, must have this plan. And DEO is your education department, district education department is the place to go. You can go there, and then that in a district, the who looks after disaster management is your DDMA, District Disaster Management Authority. And who is the chairperson? The chairperson is district magistrate or deputy commissioner or collector, whoever is, whatever you call them. You can go to their office. But the nodal officer is your district education officer. And also the deputy commissioner, you can also go to them. They will help you, but you have to develop your own plan. They will help you. And in government schools, it is absolutely mandatory by government guidelines to have these plans. And in that plans, mock drill is a part of it. So you can take their help. Yes, if this is done, then in the chat box, do we have any questions? Okay, let me just see. Okay. Just a moment. Okay. What, somebody has asked, what should be age to know about awareness, perception of child on disaster if I want to conduct survey of school? Survey of school, I didn't understand. There are multiple sorts of surveys that happen. What is the objective of this survey? What is this survey trying to do? So I would need to know that before I answer this. And about your question about age of awareness, look, this is a very, very tricky question, because we also want to create awareness in children, but without alarming them, without creating, sometimes what we do is we try to inform them about risk, but we inform it in such a manner that the entire experience is quite traumatic. So there are proper ways to, inform them about, risk, but in a very, very positive manner. You can show them a video, you can show them a picture. So age, this I would not be able to tell you. A child, maybe a counseling expert, they would be able to tell you an age, because also there is no specific, a ceiling of age or a flooring, definite age that, okay, at this age, you can start telling them. So different children behave differently. Maybe the next speaker will be able to tell you about a particular age, but the manner has to be such that the child is not, it should not be a traumatizing experience for them. You can go to YouTube, you can find out these very mellow videos, you can use pictures, you can always, whenever you tell them about risk, always, give them an approach towards solutions as well. Just don't tell them that, oh my God, the earthquakes are going to happen, flooding is going to happen, and then leave it at that. No, also tell them that we can solve it, and give them examples of where people have solved it. Give them examples of Japan, give them examples of, you can show videos of children doing, mock drills and risk related safety practices in Japan. There are, they are available in, so that would be quite uplifting. Show them those videos of children dealing with risk. So that would be very helpful. Okay, somebody has said that in 2019, Director of School Education conducted training in government schools in Manipur. Yes, this happens because I have also conducted trainings in Haryana, right? So yes. So yeah, so they are saying that if I want, okay. Right. So these are the questions that I have, that I had, these two questions. So if anybody wants to know more, they can also, write. Otherwise, over to ma'am. I think there are no other questions. So I'll just wait for 10 more seconds if there is another question.
There's no more questions.
So there are no questions, So
Yes.
over to you, ma'am. And thank you for having me. And thank you for the questions. They were good questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Dolphy, for highlighting what CCDRR does, and then what kind of training they give, and then with what kind of organization they collaborate. So it was indeed very beautiful, and then it was enlightening to know how children suffer the most during during any kind of disaster, and then how they are susceptible to a lot of diseases during those disasters. Then such kind of training and such kind of awareness will make us aware how to behave and how to react at the time of disaster. So thank you so much, ma'am. So now it's already 12, and we have the next resource person. I'm sorry, there was a network connections. So once again, thank you so much, Ms. Dolphy. So our next resource person is Miss Namrata, and she will talk about how what are the mental health conditions of children during the disaster. So over to Ma'am Namrata, if she's there.
2 minutes,
Ma'am,
ma'am. Join.
okay.
Okay, so meanwhile that she joins, there is a question that I saw. Ma'am, just let me know when she joins. I'll just stop. I just saw a question whether Sendai Agreement is implementing properly in reduction of disaster impacts. So a Sendai Agreement was signed in 2015. So the timeline is 2015 to 2030. So Sendai Agreement is an international agreement again. So that what does it do? It tells the national government to, there are certain targets and priority areas that have been specified by it. And a lot of the programs, school safety policy in India is, based on Sendai frame.
Ma'am, Namrata ma'am has joined.
Okay. So the second sessions which we are going to have is on the mental health conditions of children during disasters. I think we'll learn a lot of new things from Miss Namrata. Over to you, ma'am. Miss Namrata.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah. Focus.
Okay.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Can I proceed with sharing my presentation?
Yes, you can share.
Sorry. So you all can see my presentation now?
Yes. Yes, we can see.
Okay. So yeah, good morning, good afternoon actually. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last session of our training. This is the last day. Yes. So far you have discussed every aspect related to disasters, why disaster management is important, why this department has come into existence, why we need and how children are affected on in various forms when we face a disaster. But one thing that we are still left to understand is how the psychology or the mind of a child is impacted during and after a disaster. So previously, let's talk about the 90s and the early 20s. The psychology, psychology as a subject was not very openly discussed. It was considered that people will be thought to be crazy or insane if they report any symptoms or talk about disturbances in their mind. So all in all, psychology has developed a great deal, especially after COVID, because people have a lot of awareness was raised. There are many organizations, different institutes who are working continuously to spread awareness towards the psychosocial impacts, and CCDRR is one of them. Before we get into the presentation, I always like to share a few statistics because I feel like statistics give a lot of weightage. Also, I would highly prefer if you would, if you have any questions, please keep putting them into the chat box because I will be taking them up in in the end of my presentation. And also, if I ask any questions in between, I would love for you to respond, because let's make this as interactive as possible. I know there is a lot of theory involved, but there is also a lot of day-to-day life examples involved in this topic. So that's why psychology is one of my, it is my favorite subject, especially because it's my field, but also because it is related directly to our life. And you will be able to connect with my content, with whatever I'm sharing with my presentation, because it might have happened to you or your kid, or currently you must be facing some sort of symptoms as well. Moving on, according to UNICEF, 2.2 billion children in the world exist, and that creates almost 28% of the world's population. Now, 28% is a huge number, and out of those 28% population, 10 children who have the age between 10 to 19 years make up 16% of the world population. So around more than 50%, I think, the population from 10 to 19-year-olds is 16%, and it's a matter of great concern that more than 50% of all mental illnesses begin by the age of 14. Now, believe it or not, we have children in the family, but one thing that we don't really understand or discuss much about is mental health. And researchers have actually shown, they have proven, WHO, UNICEF, different organizations who work on mental health, they have understood that 50% of the mental illnesses start before the child turns 14, and 75% of mental illnesses arise by the age of 24. So by the age of 24, there is a great chance that if there have been difficult situations, stressful environmental factors, that then mental health, possibility of having a mental health disorder or symptoms are very, very much possible. Now, during COVID, I'm talking about COVID because it has been one of the biggest disasters that we have seen, and it has impacted not just one country, but the entire world. So the pandemic has impacted the mental health of children to on a very big scale. So in Kerala, I'm not focusing on one particular state here, but the news actually reflected a lot of information from Kerala, which was coming from Kerala, and it said that the suicide rate of children went up a great deal during COVID and also after COVID. 154 children were found hanging, while the others had consumed poison and set themselves ablaze. Kerala government focuses on children's mental health after 66 student suicide during lockdown, and this is information that has come right out of newspapers. Now, why Kerala? Now, Kerala was the first state that actually understood that there is a huge impact happening in children. There are changes, school is experiencing certain things, teachers are reporting, and simultaneously a lot of suicides were seen. So after the Kerala government actually discovered this problem, they were the first ones to actually come up with a lot of programs, a lot of initiatives where they started interacting with parents and teachers, and they kind of looked into this matter. They generated some helplines, therapy, provision for free counseling sessions so that this issue could be catered to. Similarly, not just in one state, like I said, the entire country, India, was seeing a lot of student suicides altogether. And even in this newspaper clipping, you can clearly see that 10,000 student suicides were seen in 1 year, out of which 1,400 per year are from Maharashtra. And I'm sure there must have been a lot of data, information out of your state in in many states, even in Manipur, northeast states, even in the northern region like Delhi, Haryana, Punjab, there have been a lot of student suicides. But now it's time to understand why. What was actually happening in the minds of these young students that actually led them to perform this act? There was another study that was done in 2015, and at that time WHO mentioned that the cause of death, like out of the top 5 causes of death in adolescence, suicide has been on the top 5. So if you can see the first chart, a boy, this is the data for boys ranging from 15 to 19. Self-harm or suicide comes on third. Whereas on the right side, when you see the data for girls, self-harm or suicide comes on the second position. Now, there can be different reasons why girls or women face more mental pressures or psychological issues and also move towards suicide more than boys. But one of the major factors is definitely the societal norms that we all live in, the pressures on girls, the pressure of getting married early, the pressure of not being able to complete their education, moving towards teen pregnancies, and then simultaneously dying because of those maternal conditions. As you can see, the top cause of death in young adolescent girls has been found to be maternal conditions. And when a person is kept in such environments for a very long time, there is a huge chance that they might develop a lot of negativity and ultimately lead to suicide. Now, as professionals, as parents, counselors, guides, social workers, doctors, we need to understand what exactly happens during a disaster, and what are the factors, characteristics of a disaster that can impact the mental well-being of a child. Okay, now I have listed down a few over here. The first is the type, intensity, and exposure to the event. Second is availability of family or social support, family support, community support. Third is the degree of day-to-day life disruptions. And fourth is the amount of social disorganization. That is, how well prepared, what is the preparedness of the society and the people around you in order to come out of that situation. I will be talking about these factors in a little more detail in my further slides. So I will now be moving to the individual characteristics. Now, like in the very beginning, when I started studying this subject, it was stated, the first chapter talked about how we as individuals are impacted. How is mental health, like what are the factors that impact mental health? And the first thing is the nature, second is nurture. So there are some characteristics within us and some environmental factors that impact the mental health. Now, I just talked about what are the characteristics of a disaster. That is the environmental factors that might impact the mental well-being of a person. And then there are some individual factors that are within us. So age and developmental stage is one of them. Let's assume, now I'm going to explain with a lot of examples. Let's say there has been a flood in an area and there is a family of 5 or 6 people, 2 parents, a grandparent, and 3 children, 5 or 6 people. And the youngest, there is like a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 10-year-old in the family. Now, if we actually understand the situation, the parents, maybe the grandparent, and the 10 and 5-year-old can manage their that kind of situation. They can run if required. But for a 2-year-old, that can be very, very difficult because they have yet to be developed. They are completely dependent on their family. So age, the lesser the age, more the psychological stress. The degree of dependency. The child is completely dependent on their parent. They cannot run from the house. They cannot climb the beds. It's just a 2-year-old that we're talking about. So they need the supervision. They constantly need their parents around them. Okay, so the more dependent you are on your family or your caregiver, the more stressful it will be. A disaster situation will be more disturbing for the child. Gender. Now, this is a very controversial aspect where people usually say that women experience more stress or psychological issues than men. Yes, it is true. But when we talk about this in a disaster situation, there is a, what should I say? There's some kind of debate between this, because some people say that women can handle stress better, whereas some people say that men can handle stress better because they are physically strong. So this is a debatable topic, and I will leave it to you, to actually decide whether you actually think who can handle stress better. So moving on to the fourth characteristic, that is the previous physical or mental health. So let's say within this family, one of the child has polio. There is a physical issue, okay, or there is a child who is autistic, or has Down syndrome. Okay. Now, for such a child to move out of the house and get to a safe place can be extremely, extremely traumatic. They might be left behind because there was nobody at home. Maybe the parents were at work and just the younger siblings just left that child at home. So having a previous physical and mental health issue during a disaster can cause excessive trauma. Now, I was previously talking about the factors that can directly impact a child's emotional health. So I will be elaborating a little more on that. Now, the first characteristic that we talked about was the type and extent or duration of a disaster. Okay. Now, of course, it's kind of understood the more severe, the more intensity a disaster has, the more damage it does. And the type, whether for some regions in the country, earthquake might not cause as much damage as it can cause to a earthquake prone area, right? So the type of disaster can have direct impact on the mental health. Second is the extent. What was the duration? How long did the disaster go? What was the intensity? What was the magnitude? So it is a direct relationship. The more intensity, duration, or magnitude of a disaster will cause more prolonged impacts on the emotional health of the child. Just now, first, like before I move on, why am I discussing these factors with you? How will they help you in the field? Let's say that you have you're a part of a rescue team and you were, or there has been you're a school teacher, there has been a disaster, and there are a lot of people who need help around you. There is a family who has come to you with their child and they say that we have just been rescued from a disaster and we need your help, we want you to talk to our child. So when you're discussing, you need some kind of background, and all these factors that I'm talking about will give you that background. The first question you might ask is, what was the type of the disaster? Where have you been during the disaster? Did you go to a safe home? Were you able to manage to rescue everyone in the family? The second question that you might ask is that, were you exposed directly to the disaster or not? Because when a person, so again, I'll explain with an example. You can see two images here. The first image is of a family who is living in a kacha ghar, which is not very well built. It is not strong enough to handle a flood whenever the disaster strikes. And there are these two children living in that family. And just right next to this slum area, there is this building. And on the 12th floor of that building lives another family who have a child of the age 5 or 6. Okay. Now, you tell me, when there is a disaster, well, let's say there's a flood, when the flood actually comes, who will be the person who will be directly impacted? Which children will be more negatively impacted? From image, will it be image 1 or will it be image 2? Of course, it will. Okay, I'm asking, let's see. Yeah, 1. Okay, Rizwana says 1A. Correct. So the more close you are to the disaster, the more, what should I say? The lesser your environment. Let's put it in a way that if you are living in a kacha ghar and you are living in a proper building, the surroundings that you are in, the strength of your building can also decide how impacted you will be by the disaster. So if the child is in direct exposure, there is a great chance that they might lose their family, their entire home is damaged, shattered. The child himself or herself might get physically hurt, and that will then in future cause more psychological pain. The third factor, like I just said, is separation from caregivers. Like it is very obvious that during a disaster, whether it's an earthquake, it's a flood, it's a cyclone, there is a lot of damage, and families tend to get separated during this time. Now, even during COVID, this was a very common scenario. So when parents were getting COVID, their child was left alone with their grandparent, or they did not have anybody around to take care of them. Okay. And this type of separation caused a lot of anxiety in young children, especially when children don't get to see their parents for a very long time. This also converts into separation anxiety. And during disaster, this is a very common scenario. You will get to see a lot of trauma in children, because sometimes that separation might not be temporary, it might be permanent. They might never see their parents again. So this will further cause a lot of emotional problems in the coming time. The fourth factor is perception of self-threat to self or significant other. So when a person is stuck in a disaster situation, or let's say just an accident, let's just talk about an accident, not a disaster. These situations can be life-threatening, and it can cause a lot of scarring to a child's brain, to a child's mind, and this will also further develop symptoms of losing, maybe they might get dreams, bad, they might start wetting their bed again because they're getting nightmares that they might lose their mother. Maybe they were stuck in an elevator during the disaster, and because of that, it created a lot of anxiety in the child, and every time the child would go back to sleep, they would get nightmares that I'm still stuck in that lift and I will get buried under the debris. So the perception of life threat sometimes remains in the child's mind, and it might not just be about themselves, it can also be transferred to parents. So whenever the parent might want to go back to work after everything has gone back to normal, they might still show signs of separation anxiety, because they are afraid that they might lose their parent again. Okay. The fifth factor is physical injury. Now, physical injury, when associated with mental trauma, can develop signs of PTSD. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, how did PTSD come into existence? It was during the war time, during World War I, World War II. There were so many soldiers who were made to step out of their homes, get into situations, get into war zones that they had never experienced before. And that kind of separation started happening, and then they were sent to areas which were very, very difficult to be in. They would not be able to eat for many, many days. Sometimes it would be extremely hot, sometimes extremely cold. So these extreme conditions would cause further mental issues. And then during fights or wars, they would sometimes experience a lot of physical damage as well. So once they were sent back home, their family started reporting that their partners or their family members who have just returned from war are now showing symptoms of, extreme depression. They would be suicidal. They would get flashbacks and of reminiscent images from the war, and this would further cause them to this would impact their entire life, not just themselves, but also their family life, relationships, everything around them was impacted. And that is when psychologists actually studied these symptoms, and it was discovered that when physical trauma and mental trauma come together, they can cause post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, this is not the only diagnostic criteria. There are many other criteria involved, but this is definitely one of them. Another thing what happens during disasters is that adults get impacted. Yes, of course, we're talking about children over here, but a huge part of a child's life is their family, their parents, because they are their support system. And it is completely normal for adults, for parents to lose their mind as well. They have lost financial stability. They don't have a home. Sometimes their home is completely buried, and they've had to move their lives from certain places because they have been impacted by the disaster. So as an adult, already when the individual is so stressed, they cannot give equal attention to their child. During this period, when the adult feels incapacitated and is not able to give proper emotional responses to the child of course starts to feel lonely. They feel like my parents don't love me, and this can further cause a lot of depressive symptoms, sometimes even stress or anxiety. Again, but I would like to mention here that it is totally okay to not be okay. It is not, I understand that as a parent, you need to be very, very strong mentally, but sometimes your child needs to see you like this, because when children are shown a perfect image, when constantly they're used to seeing their parents happy, it can um, sometimes move them away from reality. So your child needs to understand that even you are a human being, you might have emotions, sometimes positive and sometimes negative. The seventh factor, and which is a very important factor, is that social media causes a lot of mental health stress in children. And especially during disasters, there is a lot of content online, in the news. When you interact with other people, there is a lot of negativity around. And when children tend to hear or see these things, they register it very fast. Their memory kind of grasps onto it. And when they um, continue with their day-to-day life functions, it can impact them there. Let's say when they wake up in the morning and the parents have the news channel on, and especially during COVID, this actually happened with me as well, that there were so many deaths happening around. There were images from Italy. Now, Italy, Spain was one of the countries that was it was like devastating, the number of deaths that we saw. Now, we would see so many dead bodies in the news. They were dumping these dead bodies in huge dumping grounds because they were all COVID, they all had the COVID virus, and they had to just get rid of these bodies in a much hygienic way. So it was I woke up in the morning and my father had the news on, and suddenly I saw these images, and my entire day was just, I knew how my entire day was going to go. I felt a sudden gush of I don't know, I got extremely emotional. It was very overwhelming, and my mood just dropped. Now imagine for an adult like me, if such images can cause so much of psychological impact, what will it do to a child? So during disasters, it is highly, highly recommended to not completely rely on the social media, to keep your children away and only share information with them which is properly, how should I say, properly organized. And of course, information that comes from a parent is much more how should I say, it's not that negatively impacting as it is shown in the news. So be responsible parents or caregivers or teachers and educate your children in the right way. Do not leave them in the hands of the social media or the news channels. Now, the eighth factor, another thing that impacts mental health directly, is the cultural and contextual differences. Children and families who have previously endured traumatic experiences or have lived in chronic adversities, children who have already been facing a lot of violence in homes, abuse from parents or people around, separation from caregivers, because of their conditions, they have lost a family member, a parent, maybe both parents, abject poverty. Already children living in so much of poverty, discrimination and social exclusion are more vulnerable to such mental health issues. Of course, because they are just on the edge, right? They don't even have that kind of social support system, any kind of support system for that matter. And of course, when the disaster strikes, who will be the first person who will be highly, highly impacted? It is these children, because they are already on the verge of losing it. They don't have the proper resources to get back to their normal lives. So cultural and contextual differences have a direct impact on emotional or mental health of a child. Now, this specific point must have been discussed in a lot of detail of how community responds to such needs. So I won't go in detail about that, because things that we do in schools, things that we are taught in the community come in handy when we face a disaster. And I would highly, highly recommend to practice these. Now, whatever sessions that you all have learned, that you all have attended, that you've learned about, share that information. If you're working in schools, that is the best way to disseminate information in young children. So make sure to use these resources and further help people to understand what concerns are, what are the concerns that we face during or after a disaster. Now, these are the factors that impact a child externally. Okay. Now, after the disaster has happened, what are the changes a child faces? It is necessary to understand how to observe, what things to observe in a child when, which might indicate that there is some kind of trauma that has set in. Okay, the first, this is actually called the normal emotional reaction, response or reaction. And when a child is exposed to a disaster, the emotional responses are displayed in various forms. So the very first thing to look out for is minimal distress. Minimal distress is nothing major, uncomfortable, when the child is feeling extremely uncomfortable. Okay, inattention. Inattention can be observed during their playtime, during their studies. Fear. Now, fear can also be observed when the child is very, very vigilant. Okay, there is another point here which says hyper vigilant. What does that mean? As soon as there is a loud noise, the child will, suddenly get alerted. The child is constantly looking over their shoulder. If the parent is leaving the house, they would not let them go. They will always keep their eyes and ears open. And this can be seen in their behavior as well. They are always, always alert. They are kind of hyperactive. Their behavior will reflect that. Fear can also be seen during their nighttime routine. Maybe they're not able to sleep. Their sleep is very, very disturbed. There is a lot of break in, they might wake up 5 or 6 times in the night. They might report nightmares. You might see chattering of teeth. Now, this is a very big sign of anxiety in children, even in adults. If you see, like while sleeping, you suddenly wake up and you realize that my teeth were chattering. It means that that's a sign of anxiety. In nightmares, the child might report the images of the disaster situation, they keep coming back to the child. This can be another sign that the individual is having some sort of emotional trauma. Lack of enjoyment, which is also called anhedonia. For a child, it is very easy to observe because some things that the child loved doing, let's say playing video games or playing cricket, reading books, drawing, they would constantly tell you, ki, let's, mujhe swimming jana hai, mujhe cycling jana hai, but now they're no more interested in such activities. This can be a sign of anhedonia, that they're losing interest. There is something going on in their mind which is disturbing them. Okay, anxiety, of course, depressed mood. Depressed mood does not mean that the child has depression. So be very careful when you use these words. Depressed mood can be low, feeling low, or not being able to sleep properly, not being able to eat properly, constantly feeling lethargic. So these can be signs of depressed mood. Symptoms of re-experiencing, like I just mentioned, hypervigilance and disruptive behavior. Disruptive behavior can be observed by looking at their previous behavioral patterns. There is something off about their behavior. Like parents, they instantly realize, or teachers, they instantly realize ki, this is not how this child used to behave. There is something wrong. Something is going on in the child or in the family of the child. Maybe I need to talk to their parent. Why is he or she behaving like this? So the disruption in the actual original behavioral pattern can also indicate a normal emotional response. Now, in many, also again a disclaimer here, in many situations, these symptoms can be temporary, and they can just be a normal reaction to a traumatic event. Because let's say there is a death in the family. What is the first reaction that will come to your mind? If it's a close friend or a family member, you will cry, right? Of course, that's a normal reaction to a traumatic experience. Now, an unnatural or not normal reaction would be to laugh, okay, or to smile. So you need to judge very closely that is this a reaction directly related to the disaster? Is it in line? Is it consistent? If it is, how long is it going for? if the time is limited and the person starts to recover, it means they are resilient enough, their mental health is not as disturbed. But there are children who get impaired completely. They don't just stop talking altogether. They don't want to study. They don't want to go out and play. They're losing a lot of physical weight. Their physical health is suffering. That means that the symptoms have lasted and now they are turning into long-term disorders. That is the time when parents or people who are taking care of the child, they need to take some action. They need to take them to a proper child psychologist or a psychotherapist or a clinical psychologist. Now, within this normal emotional response, there are two stages. Two stages means what is the immediate reaction during a disaster and the reaction some days or weeks later. In the very first stage, what happens is that the child might feel a lot of emotions. Okay, now I'm talking about the situation where a child has just been rescued with his or her family from a let's say a fire or an earthquake situation. Because of the earthquake, there was a blast, there was a cylinder blast, and there was also a fire. There's a lot of debris lying around there. The child's family was partially buried in all the debris around. So they have been rescued. The child was seeing that he was there with his father or his mother who was buried there. He was there for almost 2-3 hours and now they've been rescued. So what is the immediate reaction that you're going to see? The very first one is fear. Second is denial or confusion. They might not completely understand the impact of the situation, what is happening around them. You can also apply this similar situation when I always give it, whenever an accident or a bad thing has happened in your life, I always give the example of a time when I met with an accident. So let me just explain with that. So I was trying to ride a bike and I got into an accident because I suddenly just raced the bike and it went into the wrong direction and I fell. Now, the immediate reaction that I had was that I was in a daze. I did not understand what went wrong. Did I actually meet with an accident? Was I even hurt? I did not know anything. The sense of what was real and not real, it took me at least 5 seconds to come back to my normal self. Okay. And that made me realize, okay, this has actually happened. This can also go on for many minutes or hours as well, because children have a more sensitive mind. Okay. Now, once I was coming back to my normal self, I still did not realize whether I had a physical injury or not, because my mind was still confused. Sometimes there is also lack of memory. I clearly remember that when I went into when I was getting up, I did not remember where my stuff was. What actually happened that led to this accident? So in the initial first stage, whether it's during a disaster or an accident, you might lose your senses. It will come back, but in some time. The second stage, when I got back to normal, there was also a lot of numbing. I could not feel anything. I could not hear anything. I could not even see anything for those 5-6 seconds. But the moment I got up and I looked down at my body, I realized that I was hurt. I was bleeding in my hand and my foot. That is when the actual emotions, the feeling, the pain entered, because my mind was coming back to its senses. It was coming back to normal. And that is when the second stage arrives. Now, during a disaster, what happens in the second stage? Children who are mentally stressed, who've been impacted and have felt the disturbance of the disaster, might show regressive behavior. What is regressive behavior? Progressive means moving forward. Regressive means coming backward. So as we grow up, we learn to progress, right? We learn to tie our shoelaces. We learn how to hold a spoon, or even, we start moving away from our family members. Now, what happens during a disaster is that children show regressive behavior. They might start getting more clingy. They don't want to eat food by their own hands. Sometimes children start urinating. Children who've been toilet trained, they start urinating and defecating anywhere because they are psychologically stressed. Some more symptoms that you can see are emotional stress. Some children show their Their emotionally they respond through anguish or fear or sadness. They keep the symptoms inward. They are some personality, children have a temperament of an introvert. Some children are outgoing. So other children might also show hostility or aggression. And some might not react at all. They might not show any symptoms at all. And so some more symptoms can be withdrawal. Withdrawals means isolating yourself, moving away from anything. Like even if someone wants to help you, even if your mother or father want to show affection, you're not interested. You just don't want to be with anyone. Okay. Sleep disturbances, somatization. Now, mental stress can take forms of physical pain as well. So having fever, stomachache, headache, vomiting can be signs of somatization. Pessimistic thoughts about the future. You don't see any future. Like, especially when I think about the COVID situation, a lot of youngsters, teenagers were facing this issue. They are not sure which college they want to go to, absolutely apprehensive about their future. So pessimistic thoughts about the future are very, very common. Okay. Repetitive play enactment of the trauma. This is another way to observe whether your child was impacted in a more severe manner or not. They would constantly talk about the traumatic situation. They would start crying the moment somebody starts talking about it. Or repetitive play also, they might keep showing you through play that the building is falling down or somebody is getting crushed there. They might play with their dollies or teddy bears, and they would try to they would just constantly keep repeating those acts. It means that they're not able to step out of the loop and they now require your help. Like I mentioned earlier, as long as these symptoms are not impairing the normal childhood activities, they are considered to be a part of the normal recovery process. So I think Raka sir or Balu sir, I'm not sure, but they must have talked about resilience with you. Okay, what is resilience? When you press on a spring, okay, it bounces back. So when you are faced with a stressful situation, the more easily you bounce back shows the level of resilience you have. Similarly, if your child is taking time with the support and love, affection around them, if they're getting back to their normal life, it is completely fine. They might take some time, but within a few days or weeks, these symptoms might start to deteriorate or disappear. That is completely normal. However, if these symptoms are persistent, they remain, or they start growing with time, it means that the symptoms are turning into a pathological issue. They're turning into a disorder. This will further cause disturbances and might lead to more long-term psychological disorders. Now, I'm reaching the end of my presentation because, and also I know I like to point out the concerns, the issues, but I also like to end on a very positive note. Okay, this information must have been very, very beneficial for you to understand what happens during a disaster, what all can go wrong. But I would also like to share 7 points that you as parents or caretakers or people who work in the disaster management department or rescue teams or social workers can use in such situations. So the first thing that you need to take care of is to let your child set the pace. Let's say you're trying to talk to the child and you're trying to understand what is going on in their mind. There is a huge possibility that they will not reveal all their experiences at once. They will take their time. They will, maybe they had a nightmare. They got up in the night. They told you a little chunk of the nightmare. Okay. You will slightly probe them, but they'll be like, "Mujhe aur baat nahi karni. I don't want to talk about it anymore." So give them their pace. They might tell you immediately. They might take a few days, but give them their space. Second, give them adequate time to, share their experiences. Maybe there's a huge chance they might want to talk to you for hours. You will have to sit with them. You will have to take care of that. There is a huge chance that they might get done in a few seconds and they leave you in between a story. So you cannot force them to finish the story. Let it come from within. Yes, you can give them the environment, the openness the communication, the space, the affection, so that they can feel comfortable around you, but you cannot force them to share everything that goes on in their mind. Third is provide emotional support and encouragement. Always keep in mind that family is the only place a child can heal completely. I give an example about always give an example of a plant. When we grow a seed in a plant, yeah, we make sure that we give them the correct amount of water, not too much, not too little, not every day, but maybe once in 2 days. We make sure that we put it in the sun, not the entire day, not directly under the sun, but we take them away after it's 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, because we don't want the plant to burn. So when we're making sure that the environment for a plant is so comfortable, it is so enriching that it will grow, why can't we do it for the child? A child is just like a seed or a plant. We need to give them the perfect amount of discipline, nourishment, appreciation, reinforcement, and affection. And that is where this support and encouragement will help you to reach their mind. Fourth is accept your child's emotions. I always say that never underestimate their negative, never press against their negative emotions. If your child is crying, if they're angry, if they're guilty, don't tell them to shove away those emotions. Negative emotions are equally important as positive emotions. Rather, when they're showing anger or guilt, ask them to talk about it. Make it more verbal so that they can express what's going on in their heart. This will also ensure that when they grow up, they will share the deepest, darkest, painful secrets with their partner or with their parent or with their caretakers. This is another practice that must be built in young children from a very young age, that whatever the emotion, talk about it verbally, because this will, in future, when they grow up, they will develop this habit and they will vent out their emotions more easily. This will cause less stress in the coming time. Never give false reassurances. Never ever वो कहते हैं ना हिंदी में, बहलाओ मत अपने बच्चों को कि या दादा दादी आज नहीं आए हैं, कल आ जाएंगे. Then again the child is asking, when are my grandparents coming? The parents say, कल आ जाएंगे, कल आ जाएंगे. You're just losing out on a lot of trust with your child. You're losing out on that rapport with your kid. Whatever it is, let them face the reality. The more closer they are to the reality, the more easier it will be for them to handle the situation. Bring them out of the bubble. Yes, you need to be there. You tell them that I'm always going to be behind you, no matter what, but you need to experience your fair share of failures and negativity from the community. Okay. Talking definitely provides solutions. This goes without saying. There is no better healing or technique or tool that can provide so much of support than communication, talking. And don't be talkers. Try to be listeners. As adults with children, it is preferable not to provide constant guidance or suggestions or recommendations to them. It is good when a child just has their parents around to listen to them. Okay, don't be in that parenting mode constantly. Finally, some regression may be necessary. I just talked about what regressive behavior can look like, and yes, it can be disturbing, it can become pathological, but sometimes some regression is important. Regression is a return to behavior typical of a younger child. Okay, children or adolescents may need personal care, affection, and physical contact more characteristic of younger children in order to overcome the emotional problems. I'll explain this with an example. As we grow old, we start moving away from our parents. Like when we're young children, we constantly want to be close to them. The physical touch between a parent and a child, especially a mother and a child, is very, very at its peak when they're, the youngest. But as we grow old, we stop physically getting connected with our, the hugs, the kisses, just sitting close to your parent. It starts to reduce as you grow up. Okay. But when a person is stressed, Sometimes it is seen that they show regressive behavior, which also includes getting physically close to their parents. They need that personal touch. They need that love, that affection. So sometimes these characteristics can help the person to heal. So it is completely all right if your child requires a little more attention from you sometimes, because that makes them feel warm. It makes them feel safe. Okay. And yes, this can be a very good way of healing if you are mentally stressed. And with that, I finish my presentations. If you have any questions, then please let me know in the chat box. Thank you so much. I'll just go through the chat once because I see a lot of questions, comments. Okay. I feel, somebody says, I feel all regardless of age, human experiences, emotional disturbances. My question, ma'am, is what is the best remedy for adult who have already crossed the year limit to be amended, to stay balanced in our day-to-day life from such attack? Okay. I'm not completely sure what you were trying to ask, but I think you're trying to ask me if what an adult should do in a situation, like if they are in the middle of a disaster, if they have experienced a disaster. This kind of takes me to a whole other presentation of mine, because there are different ways in which adults deal with stressful situations. Maybe you can unmute yourself and ask the question so I can answer it more clearly. I can't read out this name, ma'am. Can you help me out with this? J. Pem Ting Pem. Meanwhile, I'll take up more questions. Could you please explain? Okay. Could you please explain schizophrenia? Okay, I don't think this is a platform to discuss a psychotic disorder, because schizophrenia is yes, it's definitely a disorder, but there is no way of explaining it in very few minutes. Also, this is not related to our presentation right now.
That's a different kind of mental disease.
Exactly.
So, there's another questions. Are there any standard tools, technique, checklists, questionnaires to measure the mental health of children, especially by teachers or parents? Kindly mention.
Okay. So tools and techniques are different. Checklists and questionnaires are different. Yes, there are n number of scales, questionnaires, surveys, tests that are available for different age groups in children, and they are categorized according to intelligence tests, memory, personality, and they are also differentiated according to the symptoms that the child may report. However, these cannot be conducted by teachers and parents because you are not equipped, you are not professionally trained to conduct these tests or scales. So in case, yes, I have mentioned so many symptoms here. What you as a parent and a teacher can do is make those observations, make notes of it, and then if you feel that these symptoms are persistent and affecting the child's day-to-day life, you can take them to a child psychologist or a clinical psychologist. Always remember that a psychotherapist or a psychologist must have an RCI licensed. Rehabilitation Council of India gives licensing to such doctors who can actually practice therapy, who can prescribe medication and conduct these tests on children. Please don't do it at home. Please don't do it yourself. Also, because you will not find these tests online. These need to be bought. And you will find these professionals mostly in government hospitals, because they only hire those who have an RCI license. So in case you feel that a child is suffering from so-and-so symptoms and it's impacting them in every area of life, you can take them to a government hospital. In the OPD, the doctor or the psychologist will first ask the parent or the teacher that what are the symptoms, what brought you here, what is the case history of the child, of the family, and slowly, when they're able to categorize certain symptoms, they will accordingly start doing tests on the child. after which they will be scored on those tests, and a proper summary of the report will be made, which will later lead to a diagnosis of the disorder that the child will be going through. So just while I'm talking, you can understand what a lengthy process this is. But yes, it needs to be done by a professional, because it is not just a one-day game. It is something that is, it decides what the future of the child is going to be. Okay, so any
Uh,
other question? Yeah.
Due to some time constraint, we won't be able to take more questions. So thank you so much, ma'am. Like the presentation was really good and informative, and then we get to know about the mental health conditions of children during the disaster and how, as an adult, we should help them. So that was very informative. So
Thank
as we don't have much time, I would like to request some of the participants to give a quick feedback on the program. So those who want to give a feedback, they can just type their name in the chat box. Okay, so I would like to request one Pushpa Devi to give a feedback on the program. Pushpa, you can unmute. You can unmute yourself and then you can give a feedback. I think she's taking time. So can I request Medha to give a feedback?
Ma'am, please ensure they are able to unmute their mic.
Okay. Ma'am, Medha, are you able to unmute yourself?
I think you have to make them, convert them as a panelist, then only they can able to unmute.
I think
Hello,
Pushpa
sir.
is
Am I?
here. Yeah.
Yeah. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you're audible.
Pushpa is audible now.
Okay. Respected sirs, madams, and everyone. Myself, Pushpa Devi. I'm a research scholar of Department of Teacher Education, Manipur University. So first of all, I would like to show my sincere gratitude to NIDM and Department of Teacher Education, Manipur University, for organizing such an enlightening and eye-opening training program. And I'm also very thankful to all the experts and the members of CCDRR and IDM for their insightful presentations with short videos, and they shared their real life experiences. So as a participant, I'm very fortunate to get this opportunity to learn and gain lucid knowledge about basics of disaster management, about how to prepare ourselves and children to manage risk during the time of disasters, and about the importance of understanding children and their mental well-beings, and also about the need to create an informed environment for children, and many more informations that our experts and members of CCDR has shared. So it was indeed a very fruitful and a very beneficial training program. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, NIDM and Manipur University. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pushpa, for giving the feedback on the program. I would like to pick some more. Next, I would like to request Teresa. Teresa, please see if you can unmute yourself and give a short feedback. Teresa?
Hello.
Yes, yes, you're audible. You
Okay,
can
okay.
go ahead.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Yeah, a very warm afternoon to everyone present over here in this 3-day workshop. This one, thank you so much for the kind opportunity that have been enshrined to me to serve the purpose. Myself, Charissa Wahengwam, faculty member of R.K. Sinatobi Devi College of Education and the present research scholar of Education Department. I would like to thank all the abled panel members, then the this one organizers, and then especially Manipur University and our respected coordinators for organizing such a beautiful this one workshop for 3 days, that too for 3 days on online mode. So yeah, this is very much important for the present situation as COVID is still going on, and this program has also prepared us what we have to do after this one disaster, then pre-disaster, and what are the steps we are going to take that we should follow such that each and every child will be safe from all hindrances and all this one effects from the course of the disasters. So thank you so much. And from this the very program, we have learned many things, many minute things that we should do, and mostly I would like to mention some of them. We have also learned about pre and post disaster management, and school safety and safety throughout the environment, all the environment that consists of the human being, then the child as a valuable resources, then what this CCDR really means. So thank you so much, respected coordinators and our this one, our reputed institution, that is MU, and the National Institute of Disaster Management, and everyone present over here. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Teresa. Next, I would like to request Dr. N. Bhagya Lakshmi to unmute yourself, and then please give a short feedback on the program. Dr. N. Bhagya Lakshmi, can you please unmute yourself? I think there's a problem. So can I now request Dr. Kangjum Mukra Devi to give a feedback on the program? Dr. Kangjum Mukra Devi, can you please, ma'am, unmute yourself and give a short feedback? Okay, I will request Gaurkishore Bachaspati Mayum. So, sir, can you please unmute yourself and then give a feedback?
Maybe we can ask one more feedback. After that, I'll take just 5 minutes time.
Okay, okay.
We can listen one more. Anybody, if you want to share your feedback, you may please type your name in the chat box so that they will make you to unmute your mic.
Okay, I will just pick one last person, Dr. K. Roshni Bala Devi. Ma'am, can you please unmute yourself and give a feedback?
Dr. Mukhra, if you can unmute yourself.
The technical person kindly ensure that they are able to unmute their mic so that they can speak.
Hello. Sir, now my mic was unmuted.
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, can I, ma'am?
Yes, please.
Yes, ma'am, please carry on.
Yeah, yes. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
You are not audible. You are not audible. Hello.
Sir, now I think I'm audible and visible, sir.
Yes, please.
Yes, very good afternoon, respected dignitaries. And I am Dr. Bhaglakshmi from Damodaram Sanjivaya National Law University. Just I would like to share that I am teaching disaster management since last 2 semesters. And after I started teaching of this disaster management subject, I came to know about this NIDM. Previously, of course, disasters are there, but I'm not aware of all these NIDM or other things. So only just law. And after happening of the disaster, and what was the role of law and what we have to do. That was only. But especially about this, I have attended earlier many these webinars, but this child-centric disaster management webinar is very useful. And I should say thanks to all the resource persons, whether it may be Dolphin ma'am or Najia ma'am or Balu sir or Namrata ma'am, whoever it may be, it covered all the aspects. So nicely it was articulated by the each resource person, whether it may be activity. I don't know why Balu sir is asking right to Z to A, but after doing that activity, just I got an idea what can I do in the classroom. So thank you to you, sir. And how to teach this disaster management. Every time when we are talking about disasters, my God, it is a disaster only. How can I say or I can explain these disasters? Every time when I'm talking about disasters, people's mental capacity also will think that every time ma'am is saying about disasters only. But how it should be reduced and what is the role of community and how people should be prepared, especially with reference to the children. It was an awesome webinar, sir, and this training program is very, very useful. And I would like to participate in future events also. Thank you so much, sir, for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Which university are you from, ma'am?
Damodaram Sanjivaya National Law University from Visakhapatnam, sir, Andhra Pradesh.
Okay, fine. Please, you may share your contact number in future. We may conduct a program in association.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so I think you are already registered and enrolled with the NIDM portal, right?
Yes, sir.
You can find when you are logging with that, and if you could able to click on the forthcoming events, you can find a lot of training programs being organized by NIDM. Whatever you are interested, you can join. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other participants would like to share your feedback? Okay.
Hello, good afternoon, sir. Hello, good afternoon, sir and ma'am. This is Amita Sondatikar from Pawar Public School, Pune, Nanded City. And I'm, am I audible? First of all, I would like to check.
Yes, you are
very clearly
audible.
Okay. So happy afternoon to each and everyone. I would like to give my gratitude, and I want to just wanted to say that I'm very, very first of all thankful to be a part of this webinar. I have attended a previous NIDM webinar which was very fruitful for me, and this webinar is definitely going to help me. There are a lot of takeaways, and I would like to be very, very thankful to the NIDM who has been conducting these kinds of webinars which are very helpful for the teachers and are very great fruitful for the future generations also, especially this time which I have attended, like for the child centric disaster management program, which is very, very beneficial for all the teachers and all the schools. So I'm very, very grateful and thankful, and I would like to continue attending these kinds of webinars, which is going to be helpful for my near future. And thanks again to the wonderful resource person, great presentations, great faculty members, and thank you once again. And you all have a wonderful and blissful day. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. So on behalf of NIDN and CCDR Center and the Manipur University, I would like to congratulate all the participants who have successfully completed this 3 days training program. At the valedictory, we are going to be in the end of this program. Just I would like to share 2-3 points without taking much time. The first thing is whatever you have learned in this 3 days training, try to share with your friends and your family members so that the learning will be spreaded. Right? This is the first action point I would like to give it to all the participants. And the second thing, you may be from any department. You may be from Department of Education or Health or revenue. So you may belong to any department. Whatever the activity which you are doing in your career, please try to give importance to the children, focus on children, right? In the introduction to CCDR, you may learn that engaging children in the disaster risk reduction or focusing on reducing their risk and vulnerabilities of children. So you may do at any activity or you may be at your home, try to focus on child and give importance to child, whatever the activity you are trying to do it. And the third action point which I would like to share it with all of you is the education and the life skills or life-saving skills. Both are important for a child. For example, you are focusing on education of your child after learning, after completing all higher education. If your child could able to earn more than 1 lakh rupee in a month, but if the child doesn't know how to, or if a child or youth who doesn't know how to save herself or himself during any disaster and emergency, in the earning of that much money. So I would say that education and the life-saving skills both are both eyes for a child or an adolescent. So we need to ensure that in every child they are able to learn some life-saving skills. And the fourth action point which I would like to share here is now almost all the schools are in the vacation and the children are at home. And many times the parents both are maybe engaged in the livelihood activity. They may go for a job and the children may be at lonely at home. So being an adolescent or adult, it's our responsibility to ensure the safety of the children. And this is the time where many unusual things happening to the child, like sexual abuse, trafficking. So many times the children are being alone at home and they are playing outside. And many times the children used to fight among themselves. So it's our responsibility to ensure the safety of the children. And the fifth action point which I'd like to share is we need to teach good touch and bad touch to the girl children, right? And moreover that when they are realizing it's a bad touch, they should be in a confident to inform someone he has experienced a bad touch so that we could ensure the safety of the children. So I request all the participants to follow this, and whatever is possible, you may try to implement in your life. With this, let me complete my address here. And regarding the feedback and certificate, after 2 days of completion of this course, means on Monday, you are able to download your certificate at NIDN portal. Listen carefully. You need to log in at NIDN training portal. By using the registration link, visit our website. By using your email ID and password, log in into the NIDN training portal. After login, click on completed events. When you are clicking on completed events, you could able to find the CCDR training in association with Manipur University. Against that, there is a tab for feedback. Once you click feedback, the feedback window will be opening. Just 10 objective type question will be there. You need to give your feedback. After filling the feedback and submitting in the same place, the certificate downloading tab will be enabled. When you're clicking on certificate, your e-certificate will be downloaded. So I request all of you to kindly visit our portal on Monday afternoon so that you could be able to fill your feedback as well as you can download your certificate. All right. So if any doubts related to certificate, you may also write in the chat box. I may also contact Manipur University or any other faculty. We will get, but please ensure that the Monday only your feedback and the certificate will be available at NIDN training portal, because we need to calculate your attendance, and based on that only we could able to generate your certificate. That's why we are taking 2 days for this. So with this, let me stop here and over to the Manipur University faculties.